Hello, friends. Welcome back for another episode. We have a familiar guest on the show today, which I'm excited to chat more with her about. If you remember, a couple months, actually over a year ago, I had Irene Fehr on the podcast, and we talked about the concept of being in a sexless marriage, what that looks like, how to avoid that from happening in long-term relationships. And most recently, she reached out and said, "Hey, I have a whole brand new fresh topic to talk to your audience about, which includes what sex looks like for the person that is highly sensitive." And I'm not kidding. The timing that this email came through, I had just gotten off a call with a client who 100% falls into the category of a highly sensitive woman. So this was perfect timing. It was like the universe was aligning, divine timing. Thank you, thank you, thank you, universe, for always having my back and always sending me the exact things that I need. And I said, yes, absolutely. Let's have her come back on the show. Let's talk about this. So if you don't remember, Irene is also a sex and intimacy coach. She weaves together somatic coaching, mindfulness, and emotional communication work, and has helped develop and successfully applied her holistic connection, sex TM, approach with couples who come to her often as really like as a last resort. They're coming to her as this last resort before they turn to divorce or they turn towards leaving the marriage or leaving the relationship. And she really helps them turn it around and then gear towards deeper sexual intimacy and passion. And she is no stranger to the issues that her clients are coming to her with, because she, on our first podcast, she actually shared her personal struggle and story around losing her libido and then ultimately ending up in a sexless marriage at the age of 39. And she's done over more than 40 podcast interviews, and she has articles in things like Huffington Post, Cosmopolitan, Refinery, Bustle, Elite Daily, and Scary Mommy. So she is, again, no stranger to this topic. She has experienced these things personally herself, and is now able to help tons and tons and tons of clients through this and couples through this as well. So we're talking again about all about this concept of the highly sensitive person. And women generally might fall more into this category than men, so we're going to talk a lot about that. But really having like unique pre-sex needs, we're going to talk through the importance of these pre-sex needs and what turns the highly sensitive woman on and when is she turned on. And we're going to, of course, as always, we're talking about the connection is always the point of goals here. Like the thing that you want to focus on is the connection. It's not necessarily the sex, it's not necessarily intimacy, it's the connection that you are building with your partner that then makes intimacy and sex and all the things in between more available for the both of you. Because at the end of the day, you don't want to have sex with somebody that's just laying there. They don't want to be a part of the action. They're not feeling that passion. You're not feeling like they're actually present. I know that to be true again and again after the couples that I work with. And so you want ultimately for both people to be willing and wanting to participate in the experience that is unfolding sexually. So anyways, all that to be said, excited again to have Irene on the show today. So without further ado, let's jump into this interview. And again, thanks so much for being here. All right, Irene, thank you so much again for coming back on the show. I know it's been over a year since you were on talking about sexless marriages. And as I was saying in the intro, it was divine timing to get your email talking about the highly sensitive person, as I just gotten off a call with a client that I thought, this is her. She falls into this category. So thanks again for being here today and coming back on.
Thank you for having me as well.
Mm-hmm. So how you've continued your work, obviously. You are also an intimacy coach and a sex coach. And so I know that you're working with clients pretty regularly. How did this come up for you? How did you realize that this was a thing and an area of topic for you to explore more?
Yeah, so in my work as a sex and intimacy coach, I'm a really systemic thinker, and so I'm always trying to find trends or seeing different ways that people patterns in the ways that people are experiencing things. And so it happened to be that I was drawing particularly women, highly sensitive women clients to my practice in the couples that were coming to me. And it was typically a highly sensitive woman and a non-highly sensitive person, man. And So that was happening. And again, I was starting to see trends, but it's not out of nothing that this was happening. It happens to me that I am a highly sensitive person. And I started to piece together some of the core reasons for why I and the women that I was working with and the couples were experiencing certain things. Again, there were patterns that were emerging, patterns around, on one side, overstimulation by life, on other side, this need to connect, this deep, um, almost like more than just emotional need to connect, but the need for connection to be able to relate sexually to their partners. Also patterns around painful sex and how women were responding um, to what was happening in the couple with their own bodies. And so again, I just started to look at this, step back and look at this as a system and think, wow, there's something in common here. And so that led me to see being highly sensitive as the thread between all of us. And again, the thread that's, in my work with couples, it's particularly about sexual desire in a long-term relationship where the woman loses her interest in sex. And so a light bulb went off that being highly sensitive, the woman particularly being highly sensitive, was this common thread. And I realized too that for myself and pretty much all my clients, the common sex advice that's given didn't fit. It never fit. And so I started to again understand why, because as a highly sensitive person, we have these what I call pre-sex needs that need to be met, that are not talked about in mainstream culture, and that of course are not part of culture where only 1 out of 5 people is highly sensitive. At the same time as 1 out of 5 people is a lot. It's 20% of the population, by some
Mhm.
estimates, even more. And so I started to frame this differently and started to um, relate to my clients and to myself differently and get different results when we start to pay attention to these things.
Mhm. Yeah. And as you're speaking it, what's coming up for me is it's not necessarily just from the physical side of it. When you say somebody that's highly sensitive, it might not be that, oh, if you touch me a certain way, like it feels more painful than it should, or than it would to another person, or if you tickle me, that I'm too sensitive to that if it's too light of touch. So I'm hearing more of like emotional needs coming through and sensitivity around emotion and physicality. So can you share a little bit more on that? Like what exactly encompasses all of somebody that is highly sensitive?
Yeah. So I've identified three, well, actually four areas of sensitivity that are applicable to a highly sensitive person. The first one is the most common one that we think about, and that is sensory sensitivity. So that may be being able to detect and absorb more noise in the environment. So that could be literal noise, right? Being affected by auditory noise, by traffic, by having a lot of stimuli from different aspects. And that causes a lot of overstimulation. Again, picking up so much noise, and that filter is not being there to tune out noise that we don't want in our lives. And so overstimulation is real, and that can cause the body to shut down, to produce tension, like harden up against more stimulation. And of course, that's challenging when it comes to sex and intimacy, because if we are overstimulated sensorially by the world, and sexual stimulation is more stimulation on top of that, people are going to react. They're going to shut down if there's no way to process that.
Mhm.
And so this is a very big key when it comes to sex and sexual desire, is knowing how to protect yourself from overstimulation, to recover yourself from overstimulation, and to work with it when it comes to transitioning into sexual stimulation. And I'll talk more about that also when it comes to pre-sex needs.
Mhm.
Also, some sensory stimulation shows up in sex for a lot of people as paying a lot of attention to their setting. So the cleanliness of the sheets, the smells in the room, the smells of their partners, All of those need to be taken into account, again, because you don't want to add more overstimulation to overstimulation. So those become extra aspects to think about.
Mm-hmm.
But again, that's the most common one, but there's three more that I want to talk about. And the second one is energetic sensitivity. And that is the ability of a highly sensitive person to walk into the room and to be able to read the room instantly. Is there tension in the room? And you know how the saying is, you can cut the tension with a knife.
Mm-hmm.
Highly sensitive people can really detect that very quickly. Or the reverse, which is that when there is connection, when there's warmth, when there's joy in the room, highly sensitive people can pick that up too. So when it comes to energetic sensitivity, we can read that more, and we can also, in a way, meld and mold into it, right? We follow the flow. If the flow is towards connection, we go there. But if the flow is towards tension, we're going to be affected by it as well. We're going to see our moods drop. So that's very important, especially in a relationship, because then if you're in a relationship with a non-highly sensitive person, you're going to be very dependent on their mood and kind of going with what they're going through. And when it comes to energetic sensitivity too, that's also presence and connection. So highly sensitive people are sensitive to if their partner is paying attention to them, or if they're distracted, or if it could be distracted on their phone, but it could also be distracted in their thoughts or holding something back, withholding information, withholding their emotional state. Very sensitive to that. And that can often trigger a response like, whoa, it's unsafe. I can't read my partner
Mm-hmm.
because they're withholding something, and that can be very scary. The third area is related to energetic sensitivity, and that is emotional sensitivity. That highly sensitive people can, um, other than being empaths, also feel their own emotions very intensely. And that works on both ends of the spectrum. It could be intensely feeling joy and ecstasy, and intensely feeling hopelessness, despair, sadness. And so it is really important to know that that depth of feeling means that highly sensitive people tend to need more time to process, that they don't just snap out of it. No one can just snap out of it, but highly sensitive people even more so. And that when it comes to relationship, it's very important to have a partner who creates space, who can hold the intensity and bigness of HSP's emotions,
Mm-hmm.
that emotions are not just, again, like something to get over with or to process quickly, but that they're an important part of the experience and also the connection between the partners. When it comes to also sex, with emotional sensitivity comes the need to feel in love with a partner in order to have sex. Elaine Aron, in her book, Highly Sensitive People in Love, talks about how it's so much that sex has to have this extra element of depth, of connection, of expression of love, that it's not just an act of getting off through sexual pleasure, but that there has to be this emotional connection, this almost like a spiritual connection. And so the sensitivity allows for that. And lastly, the fourth piece of a highly sensitive person is a sensitivity to our inner life, which is called introspection, right? We can be introspective about what we're going through, and on one side that creates a depth of inner life, but on the other side it could also create a kind of a quagmire effect, that once you go in, you get stuck in there.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because it's just the depth of it is there. But you know, all of these four things, of course, they apply to the rest of our lives, but it also happens to be that sex embodies all four of them. That highly sensitive people need to be met on all these four different levels in sex as well. That it's not just, again, this is how you are in real life. You can read the room when you go into your work situation, but that this is also applicable and it's very important when it comes to sexual connection with a partner.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And as you're speaking, I'm picking up on some of Emily Nagoski's work where she talks about the exciters and the blockers or accelerators and brakes. And so, and also as you're speaking, I'm like, I am the highly sensitive person. And I didn't even know it until you just went through all of those different components to it. I would have not have, really put myself in that category. And at first, again, naively, when this email came through and you talked about highly sensitive people, at first I thought, my mind went to people on the spectrum, like highly sensitive around that. And yeah, it's so much more than that. Yes, those people might be included in this case, but it's such a larger umbrella than just that. Um, yeah, and interesting. I think that her book Come As You Are, I think would be a great resource for people to sort of uncover what are some of these sensitivities that you have. And we're going to talk further too. If you're listening to this and you think, oh, my partner is a highly sensitive person, we'll talk through too, how can you do some things to help adapt to that and make sure that sex is pleasurable and enjoyable for the both of you, while again still being sensitive to their sensitivities.
Exactly. Exactly. And I want to add too that um, when it comes to the spectrum, there's also a spectrum on the highly sensitive people, meaning that you can be sensitive to these things, and they affect you mildly. They affect you to the point where you cannot leave the house because you're overstimulated by, I don't know, traffic and city noises, or that you are so affected by people's energy that, again, you cannot separate yourself. So there's a spectrum on that. And of course there's overlap with introversion has some of the similar aspects, but not always. I'm a highly sensitive extrovert,
Mhm.
which a lot of the times make me very confused. How can I have these completely competing impulses in me?
Mhm.
um, and of course, there is the autistic spectrum, ADHD, there's trauma, early childhood trauma can have some of the same effects. But the key piece is that, and this is what I teach all my clients, and this is the big message that I want to get across, is that this is not something that's broken about you, but something to learn to work with. Just like, if you had a vase made of plastic versus a vase made of ceramics, you want to learn how to handle the
Mhm.
vase with ceramics differently than one that can be kind of thrown around at a picnic, versus,
Mhm.
again, something that you would put and that you would handle differently. And so it's about learning how to be with our sensitivities, and in a way that doesn't impact us, does enhances our life rather than hinders it.
Mhm. Yeah. And two quick questions. You mentioned a book, highly sensitive. Can you say the name of the book again and the author?
Yeah, so Elaine Aron did a lot of research about, I think, 20 years ago. She has several books, one called The Highly Sensitive Person. The second one is The Highly Sensitive Person in Love. There's a couple more.
Mhm.
And she talks about, first of all, on her website, she also has a quiz that you can take to determine if you're highly sensitive. And then she cites a lot of her own research, which she has done to come up with this term and this understanding.
Mhm. Great. Yeah, because that I wanted to ask, like, in these books, is sex something that's discussed, or is it more just in general terms? So it sounds like probably highly sensitive people in love, and definitely will link the her website to be able for people to be able to check out that quiz. My second question was, for somebody that is a highly sensitive person, do you think this a nature versus nurture thing, and where does it fall? Do you think this is something that people are born with, or is this something that we develop through childhood and how essentially our childhoods are?
I definitely think it's both.
Mm.
We are born with it. A lot of it has to do with having a sensitive a nervous system that, again, picks up a lot more things in the environment. A less sensitive a less sensitive nervous system would have more of a filter, and not pick up the noise, right? what we can consider like the extra noise. But at the same time is that it's also picking up nuance. It's picking up um, the flowers alongside the road, as if you were driving on a bicycle versus flying by on a train that's going 100 miles an hour. So it comes down to having a highly sensitive nervous system. And sorry, I lost track of the question.
Yeah, I asked, are you born with it or is it a
Nerve.
learned behavior? Yeah.
Um, so a lot of this comes from being born with that, and at the same time, nurture has a huge piece in it. uh, Childhood traumas, adverse childhood experiences, ACE. um, Highly sensitive people are more prone to be traumatized by adverse situations. So the childhood experiences then amplify our sensitivity. At
Mhm.
the same time, as our culture does not welcome sensitivity, I know I've all my life struggled against the label of being high maintenance. So, highly sensitive people are called dramatic and attention seeking and high maintenance. And so we also learn to shut away these parts of ourselves, to act as if we're not sensitive, to dismiss our own needs, to people please, to break our own boundaries and do things that we're not comfortable with because we want to belong. And so that shapes us and who we are as well. And numbing out our sensitivity makes us even more sensitive. It has the completely opposite effect. So there's a huge piece of nurture. And of course, when we learn to work with our sensitivity, that's nurture in the positive direction of helping us accept it, but also enhance our lives through it instead
Mhm.
of letting it hamper our lives.
Mm, yeah, beautifully said. And all of this goes to say, of course, there's going to be podcasts. Listening to this might be plant the seed for you. Listening to the books, reading the books, all of that. But it sounds like there's so much more to unpack here. And so this is where working with a coach, working with a therapist, like that is well versed in both highly sensitive people, but also sexuality specifically is definitely going to be beneficial to people that are wanting to do this work and explore this more for themselves.
Absolutely. And again, like I said, with the nurture piece, we go through so many experiences that have us disconnect from our own sensitivity or have us become even more sensitive as a way to compensate for example, adverse childhood experiences. And so it's important to learn what is what, to
Mhm.
unpack that with someone, and to learn the deep gift of self-acceptance and to be able to work with that.
Yeah.
It's truly profound work.
Hmm. Hmm. So you started to talk around some of these pre-sex needs for highly sensitive people. Let's get into that more. What would that look like exactly?
And before I answer that, I also want to say this piece that highly sensitive people are not broken sexually,
Mhm.
that Elaine Aron talked about, and again, the book of Highly Sensitive People in Love, how there are no differences in what turns people on, how they experience sex. So there are no differences there. But where the difference is that um, how highly sensitive people, particularly women, how they get to sex when it comes specifically to sexual desire in a long-term relationship. I personally have not seen a huge difference in highly sensitive versus non-highly sensitive when dating.
Mhm.
There's a huge difference when it comes to being in a relationship. And the key piece here, which is going to be the main theme of the three pre-sex needs, is the need for safety. The need for safety, whether it comes through slowing down, the need for safety through communication, that there needs to be more spaciousness to be had for sexual desire to develop. That it's
Mhm.
not, again, it's very easy in the beginning of a relationship. I think that's something we talked about in our
Mhm.
first interview. And then that's driven by hormones. But once those hormones wane and we are vulnerably naked in front of each other, that safety becomes even more important. So that's kind of the theme of these pre-sex needs.
Mm-hmm.
And so the first one is related very much to sensory sensitivity of highly sensitive people, and that is the need to transition from overstimulation of life, right? So it could be literal noises, traffic, children, work, people passing by, and needing to work with that to ground yourself. And most people never do that. They don't do that throughout the day. They don't do that when they transition from work to home. They don't do that when they transition from home life to romantic life. And that has dire consequences because if you are already stimulated to the point potentially of overstimulation, extra stimulation is not going to help you. And so, and a lot of highly sensitive women in particular, but men as well, will say stuff like, my partner touches me at the end of the day and it feels awful. It feels revolting. I hate to say that, but I don't want to be touched. It feels painful. That's a sign that you're already overstimulated. And like I said, it's too much. More stimulation is not going to help here.
Mm-hmm.
And so that transition is incredibly important. It needs to happen throughout the day. It doesn't have to be a lot. It could be just feeling your butt on the seat, taking a breath, going outside to smell the roses and listen to the birds during lunch, to ground yourself so that you can manage some of that stimulation. To also taking a break, some kind of transition break between work and getting home. And I recommend to my clients, like, sit in the car for 5 minutes.
Mm-hmm. I was just
Study.
thinking that. Yeah.
Take time to yourself. Again, come back to yourself. Disengage from this sensory stimulation. So incredibly important. And the more of it, the better. But these small pauses are still very, very powerful.
Mm-hmm.
The second pre-sex need, and again, you can see this has nothing to do with sex, but
Mm-hmm.
it have really profound impact on being available for sex, being available for more stimulation, and not just have a bristle response and shoo your partner's hand away, but to actually be able to be engaged and to be able to receive touch. So again, the first one is transition. The second one is emotional connection. And the reality is, in the beginning of a relationship, we cannot stop thinking about each other. We're sending notes, texts. We are with each other at the first moment that we're available. But then a couple of years later, you're like two ships passing in the night,
Mm-hmm.
where your communication is literally like, drop kids at 2. Yeah, okay, bye. Have a good day. How's your work? Good, fine. Mine is good too. Okay, good night. Right? The communication is reduced to practicalities. We are not opening up to each other anymore about our heart, what's going on in our hearts or our dreams. And that has a deep, deep and profound negative impact on highly sensitive people.
Mm-hmm.
Again, because I mentioned earlier, for many highly sensitive people, being in love, feeling like they're in love with their partner is important. And that's where building that emotional connection every day, cultivating it every day is incredibly important. It's not enough to just have a relationship on paper, but not talk to actually each other or open up. You need to have those conversations. And I think of it as you need to be lovers every day, not only on date night, not
Mm-hmm.
only on vacation time or on Valentine's Day, but you need to be lovers with each other every day on the emotional level. And when I work with couples, this is one of the first things that we do is we determine what are those ways that they can do that and help them establish this as a regular practice, not again a once a week date night, but doing that daily. Because again, highly sensitive people are highly responsive to that. Oh, and that's one thing I also wanted to mention when you brought up Emily Nagoski's book is that um, highly sensitive, high sensitivity makes people be more on the responsive end of the spectrum because they're more responsive to their environment, to the sensory overload, to the emotional, to the energetic. And so this is where it's important. You have to have something that we're responding to.
That makes a lot of sense.
And then the third piece is around touch. And I want to back up and kind of summarize a little bit. So you have sensory stimulation, you have the emotional connection, but living life as a highly sensitive person in general makes us put up an armor because just too much is happening. We live, especially right now, in a world that's moving so quickly, where there's so much noise and there's so much pressure. And
Mhm.
so the natural response is armoring ourselves. And that is what I mean by that is our bodies tightening to protect ourselves. If we're too porous and relaxed, more things come in, we get overstimulated.
Mhm.
And so when it comes to touch, it's very important for a highly sensitive person to have a safe space to de-armor themselves, to have a space where you can slowly do that, where there's no pressure. There's no like, okay, well, we got 15 minutes, or we either fall asleep
Mhm.
or whatever, the kids come in. And certainly no pressure of like, hey, we haven't had sex for a month. We need to do it now, because that is going to automatically shut down a highly sensitive person. The shutdown happens a little bit differently with men versus women. For men, it shuts down their performance. They might not be able to get hard or may not stay hard, or they might have early ejaculation,
Mhm.
but it particularly affects their performance. Whereas for women, we just don't want to have sex,
Mhm.
don't want to
Yeah.
be touched, don't want to be kissed, don't want to think about it, nothing. It shuts down the whole system completely. And so this de-armoring process is very important. And what that looks like is having touch that it does not have a goal. It's not about buttering you up for sex. It is not about getting you going. It is not about anything other than being physically connected through intimacy. It
Mhm.
could be a cuddle, if that's what the moment calls for. It could be sensual touch. It could be, again, so sensual stroking or playful touch, but without a goal. And this is the hardest part for couples to be able to relax into that space where they can just be with each other
Mhm.
without the pressure of the goal.
Mhm.
But this is where it's really important. You don't dedicate enough time to this de-armoring and then a natural blossoming, then sex for a highly sensitive uh, woman in particular will feel forced. She's not into it. She's thinking about something else. She's bothered by everything. He's moving too quickly. He's too hot. He's too cold. Like this and that. There's just all this irritation. And that's because you haven't met these pre-sex needs for being able to be truly open, to be truly able to get into the arousal, right? So you need to, if I can map this visually, you need to wind down first
Mhm.
before you wind up. And if you skip this winding down, or if you short circuit it too early, there's not going to be winding up. There's going to
Mhm.
be, okay, let's just get it over with.
Yeah.
Kind of sex. And that itself then becomes a spiral where, why do I want to have sex that I want to get over with? So I have less sexual desire for the next round. And then I get it over with again. And then the next time I'm like, how in the world would I want to do this again?
Mhm.
And the system continues to shut down and shut down and shut down.
Yeah. Gosh, relationships are hard. Sex is hard, relationships are hard, marriage is hard. I mean, there's so much work, and I know there's for so many, there's just that expectation, around sex that it should just happen naturally. You should just want to have sex. It should, right? Especially for those that are mainly fall into the spontaneous desire, right? It just happens for them, right? So it's just the flick of a switch randomly, no given time, multiple times a day, it's just there. And again, for probably the highly sensitive person, the person with the responsive desire, that is just not the case. And so this, I commonly talk about when we are dating, and you spoke a little bit to this, but when you are dating, you're putting in all the work, right? You're trying to get that person, you're trying to create bonds and create emotional safety and physical safety and all the things with this person. And then once you're in the relationship, as you said, like hormones stop, that sort of fizzles out. We stop putting in the work. And that's, yeah. And then, again, couples wonder, like, well, why is sex feeling so few and far between? Why am I over here counting the days and the months that since the last time we've been intimate? Why do I feel so disconnected, even though we're sitting here next to each other and we're in the same room as each other? And so, yeah, just all that. I just wanted to normalize again, like this is hard. This relationships are hard. You as a person have your own things going on. Now you have this other person, they have their own things going on. And so I think at the end of the day, coming back to connection, making that your focal point, that then creates space and availability for pleasure to happen, intimacy, sex, everything in between.
Exactly. And the connection piece is absolutely key, which is why I created what I call the connection sex framework. And that is that in that connection naturally happens in the beginning, but like you've been saying, we have to intentionally cultivate it and create it. And it is the only sustainable source of sexual desire in a long-term relationship, because it's not the hormones. It's not that let's get our clothes off and get to sex feeling, but it's how do we um how do we cultivate that through intimacy?
Mm-hmm.
And it's essential, especially for highly sensitive people, because we are so sensitive to that. We're so dependent on that. And that's also where the richness comes from, because connection will evolve all the time. It's not
Mm-hmm.
something you do once and you repeat, but it has a different flavor every single day, every single moment of the day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's the same for the person that might have a higher sex drive in the relationship. It's you don't just get sex and then never want it again, right? You don't, it's not just like that check the box. And so you helping your partner out, sitting down, having a vulnerable discussion, like the things that they need for that emotional intimacy that you were speaking to. It's not just okay, we check the box and now I'm ready to fuck, right? It's like it works, it's the same. The two are actually the same. And so yeah, just kind of shedding some light on that too and looking at it through that lens.
Absolutely.
So let's talk through the partner aspect of this. So somebody's listening to this, or somebody wants to share this with our partner. How can our partners be better attuned to the highly sensitive person?
Yeah, so first and foremost, it's about not thinking of being highly sensitive as a problem.
Mhm.
It may cause challenges for sure in the relationship, but it's not a problem. It's not a defect. It's not a sexual defect. I certainly concluded that about myself when I was going through the sexual shutdown and the loss of my desire when I was married about 2 decades ago. And that's not the case at all. The fact that highly sensitive people are more prone to sexual shutdown, that's true. Again, because we're so responsive to the environment, especially absence of those things that I talked about, like connection, like transition time. But that it's not a defect. And what stems from that is a mindset of curiosity,
Mhm.
not um contempt, not looking down like, okay, well, you're broken. See, I'm normal, you're broken, you go fix yourself. But more of curiosity, huh? How do you experience things?
Mhm.
What are some ways that you dream of being touched that I haven't touched you, or maybe that you might need to be able to transition from your day, and starting to pick up on that, because honestly that information is all there.
Mhm.
You're saying these things to each other, it's just that we don't know what to listen to. It's one of the craziest things is people who come to me before they become clients, the number one complaint is, I don't know what I want.
Mhm.
But when I ask them, they tell me exactly what they want, but they're themselves are dismissing that as valid. And their partners are dismissing that. Well, she's not saying what I want her to what I want her to say.
Yeah.
And so we're actually missing a ton of information. So a big piece is how is if you're, especially if you're a non-highly sensitive partner of a highly sensitive partner, how can you come from curiosity? How can you start to listen to what your partner is saying more from, oh, huh, what would that provide for her? What would that do? Huh, what actually is she asking me, rather than dismissing that?
Mhm.
Um, and curiosity is going to be key. Well, it's key for everyone's
Mhm.
relationship, because we are constantly changing and we need to be curious about what those changes are, and how are we evolving and what are we wanting. The second piece is about being a partner to a highly sensitive person, not a helper. And the difference is, the helping mentality, however noble it is, right? It may most likely coming from good heart of, I want to help someone, oftentimes comes from this kind of contemptuous position. They need help. They're incapacitated, that they're not, they're somehow insufficient. And I'm okay, I'm in my full state and I'm helping someone who is, half there. And that's not very helpful. Um, it's about engagement as a partner, as an equal, and knowing that, okay, I experience things one way, my partner experience things a different way. How can I learn about that? How can I meet them without that judgment that somehow it's less than or somehow incomplete? And when it comes to engagement, it's engaging in those areas that I mentioned: emotional connection. Don't help with sex. Make sure that the emotional connection is there first. Presence, spend time with each other. One of the key pieces that women tell me they need, which is of course also what I need as well as a woman, and that is that their partner opens their heart about what they're going through, let's say at work, their male partner. Open up about yourself,
Mhm.
be vulnerable, share what's going on for you, as opposed to just expect that um, you give her what she needs. So that's what I mean by engagement. Show up from vulnerability, show up from openness. And that will help, especially highly sensitive women, to open up, to relax in your presence, and to move through the stages of transition, the, from over sensory transition from sensory overload to emotional connection, to the de-armoring, that physical de-armoring, to then being able to, like, oh, I want to pick this up. She may be the one actually reaching out for a deeper kiss
Mhm.
than just cuddling, but engaging through those stages, rather than how do I help you?
Mhm.
And in that, I also mean, like, initiate connection, not sex. Initiate connection emotionally, initiate connection physically, and attune to where she is. And know that women in general are not going to be spontaneous when it comes to sexual desire, especially in a long-term relationship, when the hormones are of sexiness and all of that from the beginning are gone. But that all of these things will contribute,
Mhm.
right? You are preparing the soil. Trust that she's the seed, but you're preparing the soil for the seed to germinate.
Mhm. Mhm.
And with that, last thing I also want to add is, and this is a tough one, but couples who struggle with frequency of sex, especially when one person wants more than the other, they struggle with the problem of scarcity, that sex is so rare that every opportunity for touch gets coupled with a desire for sex.
Mhm.
So what that starts to look like is him reaching over to touch her. She bristles as is like, oh my God, he wants sex. And so it's really important to create abundance. So to ask for touch, to engage in touch, but to back off on the pressure,
Mm-hmm.
back off on coupling that with hopes, dreams, wishes that it will lead to sex. And then this is why when I work with couples, I have them remove sex off the table in the
Mm-hmm.
beginning, because they need to learn they need to learn how to reconnect without that pressure of, again, he touches me and that means he wants sex, or he's so sex starved and touch starved that he grabs on to every opportunity as well. We need to cut that cycle, and that's incredibly important in helping couples to break out of these patterns of scarcity and bristle response, and the emotional turmoil that happens when they're stuck in this gridlock.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And two, I think last piece that I'll add here is just not looking at the person in the relationship at, just as you, if you're the person with low desire, you don't want to be looked at as a problem. Not looking to your partner that has a higher sex drive than you as the problem, or oh, he wants to have sex again, or he's thinking about sex, right? Kind of scaling back from that and allowing him, this is just how he is, right? Like, this is his desire. But I think, yeah, both partners being able to take their ownership and how they are able to navigate high desire versus lower desire, that's the magic, right? And not looking at each other as if you have a problem, or not looking, mentioned like the bristle effect. Really trying to scale away from that and stop keeping track of how often sex is happening. Right, again, going back to the connection, making connection the measure, pleasure being the measure.
Yeah, absolutely. And what you mentioned about those judgments, right? Well, he always thinking about sex, or she's shut down, she's never thinking about it. Um, that's going to cause a lot of emotional pain. And what's really important is to understand that you're doing this as a defensive mechanism because it hurts.
Mm-hmm.
And to be able to articulate that differently, like, I feel lonely, and when I feel lonely, I want to hit you with, well, you're always thinking about sex, or you're never thinking about sex. To get past that, because it is never helpful. Those labels are hurtful, and we tend to shut down in face of them, not open up to each other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Well, this was a great conversation today. I very much appreciate you coming back onto the show, Irene. It's been a wonder talking to you. And again, just the timing of all this. I know that this is going to be a very popular episode, just as the previous one that we've done together. So thank you for continuing your work and helping people in the ways that you do. And tell us, where can we find you? The social media, website, what do you have that you'd like to share with us?
Yeah, well, I my website is the central place where I have a wealth of information on sexual desire, women's sexual desire, certainly highly sensitive, what it's like to be a highly sensitive person and how to work with that, as well as my connection sex framework. And you can find ways to how to contact me and work with me there. And I also have a wealth of case studies from my clients, couples and individual women, that show people what that process is like and what's possible, what's available on the other side, when you do this kind of work. And I know for a lot of people, they don't even know that that's possible. So I invite people to check that out. And my website is my name, irenefehr.com.
Yes. Thank you, Irene. And we'll make sure to link that into the show notes so people can easily find it.
Thank you so much for this amazing stage and opportunity to speak about this topic. And I hope it helps a lot of people.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, thank you for coming on.